Lord, thanks for this day. We pray that you'll bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm looking for an article that I wanted to refer to. And of course, there's 3,000 search results, so I'll find it while I'm talking. So today we're going to talk about before censoring because this is a big issue. There's an attack on freedom of speech all over the world. And I'll talk more about that towards the end. But we remember living in an era before censoring, but now it's everywhere and it's everybody. And for example, there was a tweet from Emmanuel Macron earlier this week, and he said, we really support freedom of expression here, but, and then they always put the but in, but we don't want it to interfere with your rights in any way or your enjoyment of life, so that makes it okay for them to censor things. Just a little bit of update on my schedule. Next Sunday here at FBC, there won't be a prophecy update. So if you've ever wanted to come here and not have a prophecy update, then that'd be the perfect Sunday to come. I'll be Friday and Saturday, I'll be speaking at a conference in Woodland Hills, California. Estimated high temperatures around 112 degrees those days. But it's a dry heat, right? And you can get information about that at Tip of the Spear website, Tip of the Spear. Brandon Holthouse is sponsoring that. And I'll be speaking with guys like Patrick Wood, who will be here the last Sunday in September, by the way. Patrick Wood, Alex Newman, Tom Hughes, Bill Salas, Bill Koenig, Brandon Holthouse, myself, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, a couple of guys. But so that's Friday and Saturday this week, and you can go to Tip of the Spear, sign up, get the live stream if you want. Then Sunday night, next Sunday evening, the 8th, I will be at 412 Church in Temecula with Tom Hughes. And then a week from tomorrow on the 9th, Tom Hughes, Bill Salas, and I are going to get together and do a little bit of a round table on the Middle East and some of the things going on there. I don't know if that'll be live streamed or taped. Watch our YouTube channel. And I mean, just sit there the whole time with it open, so you don't miss anything. That'll be sometime next Monday afternoon here in the East Coast, and I think early afternoon on the West Coast. So we'll try to live stream that, but I'm just not sure that we're going to be doing that. And then I'll be doing a conference with Mike Spalding and Patrick Wood and some others over at Brookville, Ohio on the last Saturday in September. What's that? The 29th, 28th, 27th, 28th. What's today? Second? First. Okay, so 28th, September 28th. Then Patrick will be here on September 29th. And J.B. Hickson will be here on Tuesday night Bible study, Not by Works Ministry, a good friend of mine. And that'll be in place of our Tuesday night Bible study on October 8th. So plenty of things going on. These are the things that we talk about. I'm not going to try to go through all this each week because it kind of bores people. I do go through it a bit because there are people who've never listened and they come in and they always say that repetition is the way to learn, but acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And boy, are these things in play, these issues. For example, there's well, I'll just do it now. There's a belief, held by some of my friends, by the way, that America is Mystery Babylon of Revelation 17. And that America is going to be destroyed as Babylon is destroyed in Revelation 17 in 1 hour. But I have some objections to that are textual. First of all, if I say that I don't think America is Mystery Babylon, it does not mean that I don't think America is subject to judgment for the actions that we've taken culturally, socially, and that sort of thing. So they're mutual. They're not. You can believe America deserves judgment, but not believe that America is necessarily Mystery Babylon. But the other problem I have with it is a lot of people say that the judgment's going to happen in the very near term. But as I read Revelation, it happens when the 10 kings are there and identified. So go read Revelation 17, read it all through and put everything in context. So, and it's boy, the arguments can get very heated and very nasty. So, because you don't agree with you. And then again, this is I think, an important verse that Daniel wanted to know. When are these things going to happen? All these prophecies that he'd been given all the way through the book of Daniel. And he was told to seal up the book till the time of the end. Now, some people say, well, the end times started when Jesus went back to heaven in a sense, but I think this passage is more related to the end in the immediate period leading up to the Lord's return. And he says, the words are closed and sealed up till the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise will understand. In Daniel 11, it says the wise will understand and instruct many. So let's go over a few of the things here. And I've been sort of rushing to get a bunch of talks prepared and that type of thing. So I always say, I don't know how long this is. Well, I will always say, I think this one will be shorter, but I don't know. I should give up predicting on this. So this is, so let's talk just a little bit about AI. AI is having some problems. There's concern that AI is going to be subject to the principle of garbage in, garbage out. Put too much garbage into a system, the only thing you get out on the other side is more garbage. And so AI is based on learning from other information, data, language, writings, news articles, your data, that type of thing. And the concern is that what happens is AI sort of synthesizes this information and comes up with answers and responses. But then when AI goes further to develop, it includes the stuff that it did the last time. That now becomes part of the data that it looks at. And if this is bad, and some of the stuff that comes out of AI is pretty bad, then the whole system kind of will spiral downward. I don't know if that's going to happen. I personally think that AI, large language models, are not necessarily the thing to be concerned about in terms of how this relates to end times Bible prophecy. I think that the thing that is more important is tech intrusion in everything. I had a discussion with somebody last week and they said, oh, I know that now that I'm talking to you about this, my Facebook feed is going to be filled with all kinds of stuff about, what we were talking about. Of course, I also talk about, why am I missing my putts to the right? And I never get any information from AI or Facebook on how to fix that, which is a bigger problem. But the problem is that these AI data centers, this is from the Los Angeles Times yesterday, AI data centers raise concerns over cost and blackouts. And one of the problems is that these data centers take a lot of power to run, a lot of electricity. But what have we been doing over the last 20, 30 years is shutting down nuclear power plants, shutting down coal-burning power plants. Now everybody wants, there's a huge power demand, plus they want to literally shove everybody into electric vehicles. Well, all of that needs to have electricity from somewhere. I still laugh whenever I think about it. I was out in Colorado a few years ago, and a guy goes by me on the highway in a Tesla, and they're very cool looking cars and everything, okay? And if you own a Tesla, more power to you. I support anybody overpaying for something. That's, if you want to, that's fine. But he or she had this license plate that said, I emit zero. And I'm thinking, obviously, you don't have to be intelligent or wise to get a Tesla. You just have to have money. Because where does he think, where did the person driving that think the electricity comes from? That it just kind of falls out of the sky? You know, or they harness lightning or something so I can recharge my car? But, you know, even here, I mean, if you go out here to New Albany, I've seen some pictures of it, these huge, I mean, just few dozen construction cranes just all over the place. It's like a forest of construction cranes. And they say that's just the beginning. And they're going to be moving forward on that for the next number of years or however long everybody's around. But that's all going to take power and electricity and water. I think here in Central Ohio, we're in a bit of a drought, and so the water levels are down just about everywhere, but they need a huge amount of water for chip plants, chip manufacturing plants. So this is part of what this article from The Spectator, The Terrifying Scale of the Green Revolution. And so some people we're sort of at this place where we're having a reality check about all of this stuff about climate change. Climate change is coming, we have to do this, we have to do that. But nobody's really thinking beyond the next election cycle or the next, to use a recent example, next non-interview that takes place in these political games. So this is a big deal, and nobody's really, well, people have, but they don't control the narrative. People have sat down and said, listen, have you really thought this through? I mean, if we switch everything over to solar and wind, they don't operate 24/7. And when do you need power? 24/7. And when do you really need power? At night, when the wind is less likely to blow hard and the sun doesn't really generate much solar electricity because it's not around at night. But nobody really thinks through these particular issues. This was an article at the World Economic Forum, 4 global risks to look out for in the post-pandemic era. And this was just published a week or so ago. The post-pandemic era is being shaped by heightened global risk and unpredictable shock events. And you're going to see a lot of this, particularly over the next month. There's a lot of things happening on a global scale. For example, in New York in a few weeks will be the Summit of the Future. I mean, really, they talk about us being sort of apocalyptic and, oh, you always want to talk about the future and prophecy and that type of thing. Well, look at what they're doing. They're having a thing called the Summit of the Future, and coming out of that will be a pact of the future. There will be a document that is signed. There are drafts circulating already. So shock events, black swan events, all the people, the global elitists are talking about this. Now, does this mean that they're planning these? Could be. Does this mean that they're just thinking that in this kind of world that these things are likely to occur? I think it's probably a combination of the both of them. And then here, power is dispersing in a post-superpower era while governments struggle with a recurrent crisis of political legitimacy worldwide. You look all over the world right now, people are not happy with their government. Well, it's about 50-50. Some are, some aren't. And everywhere you look, everything is divided about 50-50. And I think part of that is by design as well. The lingering pandemic mental health crisis is being exacerbated by climate and AI. Now, I think there's legitimate concerns about AI. Even the people that are running the show there have concerns. Yet, despite their concerns, they're moving forward with all of their plans. And I think Ray Kurzweil came out again and said, we're going to have everything, the singularity is going to be reached in 2045, maybe sooner. And remember that famous Time magazine cover from 10, 12, 13 years ago, 2045, it said the year man becomes immortal. That was Time magazine. And so they're still thinking this is a way for man to achieve immortality. But if you want to really be frightened about where this is all going, this article is in the Times of London this morning, and it's "Let There Be Light, Amish Solar Panel Tycoon Electrifying the Faithful." And he even has a Cybertruck. And this guy is located, it's Gordonville. Now, so I don't know what sect of Amish church, because they have different what do they call them, like districts, or they're all different. It's like I grew up with the Mennonites Amish and Mennonite living close to us, and I always called them the chrome bumper Mennonites and the black bumper Mennonites, because some of the Mennonites were allowed to have, their bishop allowed them to have chrome bumpers and chrome on their black car, and then others had to black out the chrome on their black car. They had to have a black car, but they could have chrome or not. And then this reminds me of we grew up in the Brethren Church, and there was a big split in the Brethren Church over whether you should have, back in the 1800s, about having 4 buttons or 5 buttons on your shirt. Because 5 buttons showed that you were proud and trying to show your wealth off. So they banned 5-button shirts, I guess. And then there was a big church split over stuff like that. But look at it. I mean, this guy's got, so they're replacing the horse and buggy with a Tesla Cybertruck, which, by the way, looks very much like the aluminum trash can that you might have at your house. Just saying. Okay, now I'm going to speak about the Middle East, and we'll talk about politics and that type of thing. So last week, as we were doing the update, there was an attack in the north of Israel. Hezbollah was planning a big attack. Nobody knows exactly how many rockets, missiles they plan to launch, but Israel found out about it, and about 15 minutes before Hezbollah was going to launch a simultaneous attack, Israel attacked a couple hundred sites, took out thousands of rocket launchers, I'm told, and it was an amazing attack. Nobody in Israel was killed. Iron Dome intercepted some of the things to get fired. There were drones. Hezbollah, they claimed that they attacked Unit 8200. There was supposedly an attack plan on a base where Mossad and Unit 8200 is located. Unit 8200 is the Israeli cybersecurity, cyber operations center. That attack was thwarted, and you can kind of see a little bit of the picture there on the right of Iron Dome shooting down all of these missiles. It says here, this is from the Hezbollah newspaper Al-Akhbar, or Hezbollah influenced or approved newspaper Al-Akhbar. The air battle began at 4:37 and lasted for about 2.5 hours, almost nonstop and throughout the entire area. Hezbollah fired about 250 missiles and drones at specific targets, such as bases including the Intelligence Directorate's base and sites and settlements in the north. Now, so what you have here, though, is you have this, what's very typical with Hezbollah, is something happens, it doesn't go well for Hezbollah, and then when you read what Hezbollah says about it, it sounds like Hezbollah had a massive victory, because it's all propaganda. Nobody was injured. I take it back. There was an Israeli naval person who was killed when I believe it was an Iron Dome missile, didn't hit anything, and it flew and it hit the ship he was on out in the Mediterranean, and it killed him. There were some injuries. There was some damage to settlements and villages in the north. But it wasn't, by the way, the one thing that they did do was one missile hit a chicken coop and killed about 20 or 25 chickens. And of course, what they did then was they took the Hezbollah logo and they put the rifle coming out of the head of a chicken. And they had and Hezbollah and Nasrallah were mocked throughout the Arab world, and Arab editorial pages about, oh yeah, the big chicken killer, Hezbollah killed a bunch of chickens. And then they had one where he was kind of clucking. They took his video and they sort of dubbed in clucking, that type of thing. Very, very clever. Somebody said that the killing of so many chickens was what you would call genocide. And again, I thought it was pretty clever. So, so they did all this. And then as you look at some of the Hezbollah writings about this, Hezbollah says, well, we did a great job. Part of this is a psychological operation. And in some respects, that's true. This is a graphic from Alma Research about the strike last Sunday. And they showed that there were a bunch of strikes across southern Lebanon and up into the Bekaa Valley, where there is an extensive bases and operations of Hezbollah funded by Iran. And we always want to talk about Lebanon. We should just sort of make the map: Iran in Lebanon, Iran in Syria, Iran in Gaza, Iran down in Yemen, because that's really what's operating. And by the way, Iran in the areas of Judea and Samaria. More about that in just a moment. But I saw an interview this morning with Zarit Zahavi, who is the founder of Alma, and she made a very important point. Yes, everything that happened last Sunday in terms of a preemptive strike by Israel was fantastic. It worked. Everything was great. But it didn't change anything on the ground. It didn't bring any of the 60 or 80,000 people who've evacuated and moved away from the north. And by the way, that move is having a huge economic impact because they're now in the market for rental places to live on a permanent basis in the area in the Galilee, a little bit further south, and all the way down to Jerusalem. So it's affecting the markets. So rents are going way up through the roof, just like they are, it seems like, everywhere else. So she says, so what happens, she says, is that it hasn't really changed the facts on the ground. People are still not living in their homes. The villages, towns, the 45 villages and towns that are essentially completely evacuated are still completely evacuated. There was an article somewhere I saw, the last man in Metula, which is way up in that little sliver there north of Kiryat Shimona. It's surrounded, almost completely surrounded by Hezbollah and Iranian-controlled territory. A lot of these missile sites that were attacked, people said, oh, they're attacking civilian sites. Well, Hezbollah lives there with their families. They use the civilians as human shields. There's schools, other businesses, that type of thing. But that whole area, about a 2 to 5 mile strip along the border in the blue area, is completely evacuated, even over into Nahariya. And nobody knows when those people will return. And Zarit Zahavi from Alma, her point in the interview was, listen, we can't live with the new normal. This, apparently, somebody's decided that this is the new normal. It used to be if one Israeli was hurt or kidnapped or attacked or one missile was fought, Israel would go, for lack of a better term, would go ballistic and deal with it in Gaza and elsewhere. Now they have thousands of missiles and rockets, and Israel fires back with some, but the basic facts on the ground don't change. And so Hezbollah sees this as a major propaganda victory. We scared those people. Look at them, they ran away. They haven't come home. We're winning. We've had a major psychological victory over these people. And so something needs to be done. And so the big discussion in Israel right now is, okay, what do we do? Now, originally, the concern up there was that the tunnels and everything, that Hezbollah would come across the border, kidnap people, and take them back to Lebanon. In other words, they would do in northern Israel what Hamas jumped the gun and did down in Gaza and southern Israel. Now, I don't know that that's as much of a concern now because the people don't live there along the border areas. So if Hezbollah came across, they'd have to go a little bit further. But that's still not acceptable because what have they done? They've shrunk Israel. And I've mentioned to you many, many times about the poster that was in Tehran in Palestinian Square that said, not are you satisfied with 80,000 evacuees in the north? Are you ready for 2 million evacuees in the north is what the poster said in Hebrew in Tehran. So I think they were trying to send a message. So what they want to do, and I think what they started to do with these attacks over the past week, 2 weeks, is they're trying to move that shrinkage area further south. And Israel can't accept that. It's a small country. They can't continue to lose territory. So some people are advocating, and I think this is right. Okay, listen, you're going to make us move. We're taking your territory, taking some of your territory. We're going to just put settlements in parts of what we call the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. We're going to take the northern third of Gaza. And we're going to put a 2-mile buffer zone along the Gaza-Israel border, even going forward far into the future. Well, Gaza's not that wide. It's about 40 miles long, but it's only 5 to 8 miles wide. So you take 2 miles of that and make it a bigger buffer zone, that shrinks Gaza. And boy, they don't like that. You can't shrink our territory, but that's what they're doing here with these attacks. And so the new normal just can't continue. So for example, here's a civilian area in southern Lebanon. And you can see that from the school to that one red dot there is about 150 meters. Same way from this civilian area to this mosque. And so these red areas are where these launchers were located, like right between a school and a mosque. And they do this intentionally because if Israel misses and hits the mosque or the school, the press in the world just goes crazy. So here's a little summary of some of the things. 100 fighter jets preemptively struck 270 targets. 90% of the targets were rocket launch barrels and rockets targeted at northern Israel. 230 rockets were launched by Hezbollah, and most of those were intercepted. So this is a big victory for Israel. And excuse me one second, I need to take something out here and move it down to some other place. Oh no, actually it works here. So there's a recent Foreign Affairs publication, I think it was not the most recent issue, but the next to last issue that's been published. And look, these are CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, globalist types, Richard Haass, and people like that. But, I think it's important we read and understand what they're saying. And this is a very good article because it says America isn't ready for the wars of the future. And I'm just going to read you one paragraph out of that article. The use of unmanned weapons, like drones, is essential for another reason. They are cheap. Drones are a much more affordable class of weapons than our traditional military jets. An MQ-9 Reaper drone, for example, costs roughly a fourth as much as an F-35 fighter jet, a couple $100 million. And the MQ-9 is one of the most expensive such weapons. A simple first-person drone costs just $500. A team of 10 of them can immobilize a $10 million Russian tank in Ukraine. Over the past few months, more than 2/3 of the Russian tanks that Ukraine has taken out were destroyed by such drones. This affordability could allow states to send swarms of drones, some designed to surveil, others to strike, without worrying about attrition. These swarms could then be overwhelmed with legacy air defense systems, which are not designed to simultaneously shoot down hundreds of objects. Even when defense systems prevail, the cost of defending against swarms will far surpass the cost of attack for the enemy. Iran's April mass drone and missile strike against Israel on April 13th cost Iran about $100 million. but U.S. and Israeli interception efforts cost more than $2 billion. Now, some people say, well, you don't need to worry about that because you still have to fight it, you still have to shoot them down. But the point is, it's a war it's a cost war, and if they're fighting with cheaper weapons, you can't sustain that for a very long period of time. Now, I've been meaning to get to this because I think this is important. So this is an article by Tony Badron. I've referred to it the last few weeks. I'm actually going to play part of a clip, and it's called The Ottoman American Empire. Now, Tony Badron writes for Tablet Magazine. He is a Lebanese. He's an American citizen now. And he was interviewed recently by Carolyn Glick. It's an excellent thing. And he talked about sort of to understand the dynamics of the American-Iranian blueprint for Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, we need to look at the late Ottoman Empire and its relationships with the great powers of Europe. So here's a little bit of the interview between Carolyn and Tony Badron. You should go to her YouTube channel, JNS TV, and listen to it. But this will give you a little bit of a flavor, because what our whole government is doing is like we're trying to build up Lebanon and we're trying to support Iranians. Everywhere we look, they're doing this. And we've been doing this for 50 years. They did it in the Reagan administration. It's been sort of the Washington motif. Now, we will do things every now and then make it look like, oh yeah, we're for Israel, we're helping Israel and everything. But the overarching thing that happens is that Iran gets supported at the expense of Israel. So, and that was part of the interview I did with Dr. Gil White a few months ago. So here is a little bit of that interview.
Terrorists, whatever, but that's what that faction, this ruling faction in Washington, this ruling faction in the Democratic Party, that's what it tied itself to. It tied itself to those guys.
So, okay. So, all right. So you, I went like this because my brain, I have to like keep it inside my skull because it's about to explode. So I should be wearing a helmet right now just to protect. But anyway, so to prevent my brain from exploding by what you said, and there are tens of thousands of Hezbollah forces along the border with Israel. That, the reason why we have 80,000 internal refugees from the northern border communities is because we were afraid that they were going to turn Avivim into Be'eri and Metula and Kiryat Shmona into Kfar Aza and Sderot. So that's why everybody's in hotels and has been for the past 10 months. And the question is, none of this deal that's on the table is going to let anybody go home, because the deal has no implication for Hezbollah's forces, does it? And I mean, given everything that we know about the LAF, the Lebanese Armed Forces, and UNIFIL, and now everything that we understand about the American policy, nobody's going to enforce this. They're not dead. They're, the ones that haven't been killed are alive, and they're winning. And so the threat against Israel, the actual concrete threat on the ground, boots on the ground, rockets in their hands, missiles in their hands, it's still there. It's unaffected. And in fact, it's empowered and entrenched even more because the United States is now openly siding with them and equipping them. Because like you said, they're going to give them 10,000 more troops, presumably with arms, with artillery shells, with everything, with nods, with night goggles and all the rest of it. So they're going to have all of this advanced equipment, courtesy of American taxpayers. And they're going to 7 kilometers north of Litani. And anyway, that's not going to be enforceable. And anyway, they live there.
Right.
So the threat against Israel is going to be expanded, not diminished. Is that correct?
In strategic terms, yes. So here's what the U.S. is offering, right? It's basically a shell game, right? So what the United States is offering is the following. We're going to return to a October 6 reality, or in the case of Lebanon, October 7, I suppose, reality. Whereby everyone is going to pretend that, we will do some visual trickery, like we might remove one of those environmental observation posts that Hezbollah set up, right? And instead, it's going to be an LAF post, whatever. Okay, and we're going to say that Hezbollah is no longer there. They're 10 kilometers away, right? And so you're not going to have anything visible there. But it's basically just because it's based on Hezbollah's decision not to attack or whether to attack. Shab'a Farms may be an exception, we're not quite sure yet. But basically, you are going to end this round and freeze in place, and it'll be quiet like it was in the lead up to October 7th. That's what's on offer. Plus, except for what the strategic reality that has taken shape over the last 9 months, which is what? Which is that Hezbollah has shown that it can empty northern Israel of its inhabitants, right? It can operate under American protection that prevents Israel, and also Israel itself may be self-deterred because we can open another front somewhere else that preoccupies Israel, so it makes Israel reticent about whether or hesitant about whether or not to open a second front. But it doesn't matter. The point is, we can depopulate northern Israel, we can open a front and not incur massive destruction from an Israeli retaliation, all under American protection, and then we can call up the Americans to ratify this strategic reality in some sort of an agreement. That's the new strategic reality, and that is not a good place for Israel to be. But there's another thing too. One of the points of this purported deal that the Americans are pushing is that just as there is a redeployment, so-called, of Hezbollah troops from the border, Israeli troops have to redeploy and demobilize. So the sovereign military of a sovereign state has to redeploy to mirror the deployment of a terrorist organization. That's the American initiative, right? So again,
that's one of the reports. I mean, it is a report. It's not the only one, but I think other reports, but that's not true.
I believe it was sourced. I have to double check. I should have checked, but I believe it was sourced to American officials. So anyway, but the point of it is, it doesn't matter whether that ends up taking place or not. The point is the premise. And the premise is the same thing that's the significance of the maritime agreement. At the time, that's what I wrote. It's like, you all are missing the point. The strategic reality that this agreement puts in place is extremely bad for Israel. It means that the United States is taking Hezbollah and Israel and treating them putting them on equal footing.
1701 did that as well. I mean, let's just be clear.
To a certain extent. And by the way, there's another mechanism also that's reported in this deal that kind of harkens back to 1996, whereby you create a group of external state actors. Just like in 1996, there was this called the April Understanding of 1996, when Israel and Hezbollah were fighting in South Lebanon prior to the Israeli withdrawal, and they came. And this is something that Nasrallah has wanted to reactivate since 2006 because he lost it.
Well, then it's also what Borrell from the EU was trying to reinstate in response to the massacre of the children, where he said, "Oh, we need an international commission to see who really is responsible."
I mean, that's kind of related. Right? It's related to it. It's slightly separate, but the point is that it's what Hezbollah wants, which basically creates an international body, a body of states, regional state and European states, who, by the way, all have.
Okay, so what will happen if they do get this international body? It'll be like the UN and UNRWA in Gaza. The terrorist organization will fund it, people will fund it, and they'll do the exact same thing in southern Lebanon, continue to do the same thing they're doing in southern Lebanon that they did in Gaza, under the auspices of international cooperation. And it's insane. It's not going to work. And so, as Rit Zahavi said, and Carolyn has said in some of her other programs, we can't live with the new normal. The new normal is intolerable. We need to send our people home. But then the question is, how do you make it so that people will want to go and live like from here to the back to the parking lot away from the Lebanon border like they have for a long, long time? And the answer is you have to clear Hezbollah out. If you put them 10 kilometers away, I mean, how quickly can you drive 6 miles? And by the way, if somebody's coming at you from 6 miles away and you have to pack up and leave, you shorten your time. So you have to move them even further away. And I don't see how that, I mean, I look at this, I read about it, and I look at what has happened in Gaza, and I'm like, it has to be that way in Lebanon to keep Hezbollah from occupying that area. And Israel has to occupy the area, just like they have to occupy and control Gaza, because they didn't. They thought they could manage it, and how did that work out? Didn't work out too well. Now, these are some things from earlier in the week. Jonathan Spire had a great article in The Spectator the other day. It's also at the Middle East Forum. I think it was published on Monday. And he talked about the fact that, Hezbollah didn't really do a very good job. It wasn't that strong of a response. Iran hasn't really done anything. And so now everybody's sort of thinking like, these guys are paper tigers. They're not that strong. But then other people are thinking, well, they're just doing this because they want to work on their nuclear program. And if they work on the nuclear program, then we have a big problem. Now, people in the think tank community have been writing about a potential nuclear exchange between Israel and Iran for some time. Anthony Cordesman, who recently passed away, wrote at the Center for Security, well, I can never remember the name of it, CSIS, back in 2007 and 2009 about what would happen in a nuclear exchange between Israel and Iran. Now, this is 15 and 17 years ago that he was analyzing this. But when we look at this in terms of Bible prophecy and that Israel survives all of this, his analysis was kind of interesting because he said, if there was an exchange, Iran effectively ceases to function as a country. It's over. Israel could survive and function. Now, that was kind of an interesting analysis in light of the supposed disparity in powers in a thing. So in the last 24 hours, though, so this is what happened this week leading up to this. So this is from the Jewish Chronicle in the UK. Sinwar is using all his Israeli hostages as human shields. Now, this is the big question. Supposedly 100 hostages. They estimate that at least half of them are dead. Some are suggesting that all of them are dead. And they're bargaining with them. They're bargaining with the bodies. So Israel, in Gaza the other day, there were, this was some of the female people in the north that were evaluating things, but this has been a big problem. So, and this is Israel Katz, or Yaakov Katz, writing in the Jerusalem Post on Friday, Iran toys with the West as it continues to edge closer to nuclear capability. And this is a big concern. David Weinberg at Jerusalem Post, same day, is Washington paying off Tehran with nuclear coin. And this is a big problem because if they're wrong, they're wrong. Now, yesterday, there's a huge political issue in Israel about the hostages. The hostage families, some of the hostage families are saying the government should just make a deal and get the hostages home and forget about everything else. But the people in charge think, no, it's a much bigger picture. We want to bring the hostages home, but it's not that simple. So they did find 6 bodies in Gaza yesterday, recovered them, including this American-Israeli hostage, Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, his parents have been one of the leading advocates for just getting the hostages home at any cost. His body was found, but when they found the bodies, they found that they had been, I think I just saw a tweet or message from Prime Minister Netanyahu, they've been shot in the head recently. They've been executed by Hamas. Of course, Hamas issued a statement saying, hey, it's all your fault, Israel. You're the ones who are responsible for their death. But Hamas is not negotiating, well, saying that Hamas negotiates ever in good faith is it would be a complete fabrication. So it's a big deal. Now, when CNN reported Goldberg's death last night, what did they say? Israeli-American hostage Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, has died. He was executed by terrorists. But at CNN, to make that a little bit more palatable, you say, oh, he died. This is sick. Now, if you go, by the way, if you go to this tweet, I found this tweet this morning from CNN on Twitter, or X, and I go to the link down here. Now the link looks like this. Israel military says 6 hostages brutally murdered. So it's okay now because we've got the truth up there. But what happened was CNN exposed themselves greatly. So here's a picture of the hostages that are now deceased. I saw some reports this week of a hostage, and Hamas was one of the organizations out there in Gaza was saying, well, it's been 9 months, and they showed a pregnant, what was believed one of the female hostages is pregnant, and then they had the sound of a baby crying in the background. So the implication being, hey, we impregnated your hostage, your female, because we're in charge, we're in control, and this is what they said they were going to do. And of course, all the pro-Hamas people say, oh, that's just a fabrication. There was no rape. There were no beheadings. There were no any of this. They deny everything, even when it's staring them right in the face. Then this morning, down near southern West Bank, near Hebron, 3 policemen were shot and killed as they were driving in their car along a road. This is having a huge impact across Israel. I have a lot of friends there, and they say, I've lived here 25, 30 years. For the first time since I've lived here, I will not go into Judea and Samaria and drive. And Pam and I, we were in Judea and Samaria with Joel Kramer when we were there back in 2017. And, people are thinking long and hard before they go into any of these areas. And there was an attack at Gush Etzion Junction near Efrat, some of the settlement areas where I have friends that live, people that I've interviewed. I've been down there. Gush Etzion Junction, that's at the shopping center there, where people from Efrat go to shop. That's where, remember Ari Fold, the big Jewish guy, very pro-Israel, was stabbed and killed by a 15-year-old while he went down there to pick something up for his wife. And severed his aorta. He chased the kid down before he collapsed and shot and killed him. But it was very emotional. I remember I was on the way to church when I saw a video from Avi Abula saying Ari's dead. And Ari was the sort of the consummate, I love Israel Zionist. And I love everybody in Israel. But listen to this. The 3 police officers killed in this morning's shooting attack in the southern West Bank are, I don't know what CH stands for, Chief Inspector Arik Ben Eliyahu, Command Sergeant Major Hadass Branch, and First Sergeant Rory Shakuri. The first guy is from Kiryat Gat, is survived by his wife and 3 children. Branch from Shaddai Moshe is survived by her husband, 3 children, and a granddaughter. Shakuri from Sderot is survived by his wife, a daughter, and a granddaughter. His daughter, First Sergeant Moore Shakuri, was killed battling Hamas terrorists trying to take over the Sderot police station on October 7th. So imagine his wife and his other daughter. They've lost a daughter or a sister, and now they've lost their husband in a terrorist attack. And now you have all these things that are sort of percolating through Israeli society this morning. I was communicating with some people this morning, and they said, the concern about the government and distaste a lot of people have for Benjamin Netanyahu and the current government is only made much, much stronger by these type of events. Here's a picture of the 3 that were killed this morning. And Israel's fighting multiple front wars. I did an talk with Olivier Melnick this week at Shalom and Messiah YouTube channel. And we talked about the fact Israel has at least 7, 8 fronts that they're fighting on simultaneously right now. Of course, they have Gaza, they have Lebanon, in the north they have Syria, they have Iraq, they have Yemen, they have Iran, and now, as you'll see in a moment when I talk about it, there's an eruption in the West Bank. And there are people in Hamas, I think he's probably the Hamas number 2 guy. I think he lives in Qatar also, very rich, multi-billionaire, said we need to start another intifada. And what happened in the last intifadas that they've had, first and second intifadas? Suicide bombings. Last week, there was a guy who tried to do a suicide bombing at a synagogue in Tel Aviv. He was on his way. He was from Nablus, up in the north. That's where biblical Shechem is located. And I've been there. And as you drive down through the center of Nablus, every single intersection is a martyr square. And there will be a picture of a guy smiling, flowers around him, usually a weapon like a AK-47 or something, some type weapon. And when was that painting done? Well, that painting is based on a picture taken before the guy went on a suicide bombing operation. So a lot of the suicide bombers came from Nablus. This one came from Nablus, and believe me, don't go looking for it. I saw the pictures of the aftermath. It was a mess. But he was trying to get to a synagogue, but the bomb detonated too soon. And I think he had 25 pounds of explosive in the backpack. He could have killed 100, 200 people in a crowded synagogue. And so now is this going to become the daily reality throughout Israel? They're finding, I saw a video of, when you go through Israel, there are checkpoints everywhere. And, usually in the soldiers at the checkpoints and these gals that interview you when you're trying to leave Israel, because they want to make sure they're like human lie detectors. They're incredible. And they're very clever. They try to trip you up and asking you questions. I have artificial joints, so I had one gal grilling me the last time we were there. Why didn't you bring your card? And how do I know that that's a artificial joint there that's showing up on the X-ray? But anyway, they're very good. But they can only do so much. It's a big country. It's a small country, but it's a lot of open spaces. And they're finding a lot of things. So you have, and across the Middle East, there's like wars, rumors of wars and things that are happening that I'll just give you sort of a summary. When we talk about an Ezekiel 38-39 alignment, I don't think we're close to Ezekiel 38-39. I think we can see the beginnings of it come together. But what you're seeing here, for example, Libya. Libya is put in Ezekiel 38, and they've been in a civil war for a long time, and now what's the report now? Libya's oil output halved following political standoff. Their oil production in Libya has dropped by 67%. So who's competing for control of Libya? Well, you have a number of countries, Iran, Russia, Turkey. Now, Turkey and Russia are on opposite sides, but so one part of the country controls the western half, the other controls the eastern half. I believe Turkey is related to the eastern half. Yet, remember that map they made up of their economic development zone that went from eastern Libya to southern Turkey, even though the faction that Turkey is on the side of is on the other side of Libya. It doesn't make any difference to Erdogan. He's going to do whatever he's best. Here's some of my new chess pieces that I've been putting together, showing people the players that are in play. Iran is very important. Turkey's becoming more important. There's a lot of articles this week in the press about how Turkey has all of a sudden seems to have extreme influence throughout Africa, it's particularly northern Africa. Well, why is Erdogan doing that? Erdogan is Muslim Brotherhood. He's trying to push Islam and move Islam into Africa. Egypt and Ethiopia are on the verge of war. Part of that is due to the big dam, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD. So if you want to think of it as GERD, it's giving Egypt heartburn because they're afraid it's going to shut off the water. And if there's a drought, Egypt's not going to have much water. And if you ever look at a map at night of Egypt, 97% of the people live along the Nile in Egypt. So it's a very big deal. But the other problem is that Ethiopia is landlocked. They want an exit to the Red Sea into the ocean. So they've entered into an agreement. They've tried to enter into an agreement with Somalia. Or no, they entered into an agreement with a faction in Somalia. Say, hey, you guys can have a corridor to the ocean, Ethiopia. But that faction is in control of the government, and the control of the government is in another faction that's friendly with Egypt. So now Egypt and Ethiopia appear to be on the verge of going to war over the dam, over Somalia. And then you have, just south of there, you have Sudan and these other areas. So it's very, very thing. Here's an article from the Financial Times just Friday. Turkey projects growing power with a network of Africa alliances. And that's the Somalia flag there on the left. And Erdogan's very clever. Remember, he was very much involved in the Muslim Brotherhood takeover for a time of Egypt. Now, El-Sisi came in and did a coup and got rid of that. So Israel's in a very tough spot. Now, this was in the Jerusalem Post this morning, Iron Beam laser air defense system. It says will be ready next year. That would be very helpful. So whereas an Iron Dome missile costs $50,000 to $100,000 to shoot down a drone that might only cost $5,000, Iron Beam will be able to shoot that down. Depending if they have them deployed in enough places, it will cost about $2 in electricity to shoot down those missiles and drones. So that will be a game changer. So people have been waiting for that, and Raphael announced this week that it's probably going to be coming. Now, this is reports. IDF has launched a significant operation in the West Bank that may last days. The areas the IDF is operating in have developed into strongholds for terrorist groups such as Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Al-Aqsa Martyr brigades. This is going on throughout the what's called the West Bank, Judea, and mainly in Samaria. They've gone into Jenin, they've gone into Nablus, and they've killed people. They've torn up roads and that type of thing, so they can't get from one place to another. And everybody, of course, is losing their minds over this. Even the New York Times this morning, they talked about Israel's 3 wars in Lebanon and the West Bank, as well as Gaza. And everybody I talk to in Israel says the West Bank is on the verge of exploding. And when it explodes, you need to understand that down in Gaza, they had a fence. They had sensors. They had people watching the fence. They didn't pay any attention to them, but they were down there. At least the commanders didn't. Another guy from the IDF resigned this week. There was a report, I'll mention in just a moment, about what happened on the days leading up to October 7th, but they didn't pay attention to the warnings. Understand that while there is a fence and a separation barrier in places between Israel and Judea Samaria, like down around Bethlehem and Hebron and that type of thing, it's not monitored like the Gaza fence was supposed to be monitored. And what happens, I was talking to Jonathan Feldstein a few weeks ago, and he said, there's no fence between me and the mosque over there that's a hotbed of terrorism or supporting terrorism. We used to hire all these people from the West Bank to work here, but that's not going to happen while I'm alive, while my kids are alive, and maybe my grandkids are alive. But that has a huge economic impact on those areas because the people can't work. But there's no fence, as he said, separating them from me. They had a fence and barriers down in Gaza. That didn't work. Gush Etzion, I mentioned that. They had car bombing there. This is the report. It was published on the Channel N12 website. I wasn't able to find it. I was digging through there today. So if you find it, you can contact me through the email on the church website and let me know that you found it, or send me a copy of the report. But they thought 3,000 Gazans had come across on October 7th. This report done by the Gaza division of the IDF said, no, it was 6,000. It was twice as many as we thought. So this article at Jerusalem Institute for Strategic Studies, or for Strategy and Security, no technology can substitute for an IDF presence on the Gaza-Egyptian border. And this is the big deal. So down in Gaza, they have what they call the Philadelphia Corridor. That's the area that connects Gaza to Egypt. Not a border between Israel and Gaza. It's a border between Gaza and Egypt. And they've destroyed a bunch of tunnels down there this week. I think they said they've gotten about 80% of them, but a lot of them were big enough to drive trucks through. And how do you think Gaza got all those weapons, materials, that type of thing? All that stuff that they could have used to build a great area, they used to build a terror base. Again, another article, Jerusalem Post Friday, from Jonathan Spire, about the fact that in the Red Sea area, they're doing okay, but the Houthis are continuing to just do what they want down there, and shipping is shut down. That's about, the tolls are about 20% of the Egyptian revenue that the government uses to operate on. So that's having an impact in Egypt, particularly if they're going to go to war with somebody. Where are they going to get the money to finance the war? One of the things they want to do in the release is this guy they call the Palestinian Mandela, Barghouti, and he's in there for, he'd been in jail for more than 20 years. He killed, I don't know how many people, but he's very, very popular in the Palestinian areas, and they want to get him released in any hostage deal. But how do you make a deal with somebody who just shot 6 of your hostages in the head? That's who you're dealing with. Now, people are trying to say, well, we'll get a boss. A boss will come in, the Palestinian Authority, and that seems to be our government trying to revive the Palestinian Authority. Now, the word today is this is him meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman early this past week. He's reported to be in he's sort of like, do you remember the old, it was on Saturday Night Live, General Franco in Spain? General Franco is still dead. That Chevy Chase would report that every week because it was like Franco's dying, he's going to die. Well, Abbas has been said to be in declining health for some time, but he is. 87 or 88. So he's sort of nearing the end of the string. And then what's going to happen? Who's going to replace him? And I'm just saying that throughout the West Bank, the Palestinian areas, Hamas is extremely popular and probably only grown in popularity. So anybody who's sitting there telling you, like certain candidates for president, that they're going to do some kind of reconstitution of the Palestinian Authority and everybody's going to be happy are, how do I say this? They're either drunk or smoking something. And I'm talking about one of the candidates for president. A bunch of Arab members of Knesset from the Joint List went and visited the imam who eulogized Hania in Qatar. I played parts of that funeral service. He's been banned from entering Al-Aqsa, the area of the mosque, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And he said, well, we are the only ones that are allowed to enter there. Oh, but nobody crawls up his backside like they do Ben Gvir, who says, well, all Jews should be able to pray on the Temple Mount. And maybe we should build a synagogue up there. And everybody loses their mind over that. But these imams all say, this is ours. Even though historically, by the way, and in the Quran, go find the word Jerusalem in the Quran and send it to us if you ever find it. Seth Brantzman wrote this the other day, and I think this is true. Airline flight cancellation chaos is unsustainable. And I talk to people, people who've had tours scheduled, they canceled because flights canceled. I think American Airlines have said they're not going to fly to Israel until at least April 30th next year. Delta is kind of day to day. I hear that they're going to extend their thing through the end of October. And so then you're sort of down to El Al, is about El Al and a couple other airlines, the only ones flying into Ben Gurion. And I know Seth was in the U.S. and had trouble getting back. His flights kept getting canceled. And it just can't, the economy can't sustain it. Tourism is a big part of the Israeli economy. Now, this is a report from Commanders for Israel Security. These are leftist guys. This is the guy who used to be the head of the Mossad. And they're the ones who caused the problem. This kind of thing. And listen to what he says. The Jewish March of Folly has been forging ahead now for more than 5 decades. Oblivious to the facts or surrounding realities. Some 15 million people live between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Half are Jewish and half are not. I think that number is not correct, but that's a much bigger argument to have later. Yet some Israelis are possessed by an irrational idea that someone, let alone an entire nation, is willing to forgo freedom and live forever deprived of national or civil rights. So he's talking about people in Netanyahu's coalition. These people think that Israel should be the country between the river and the sea. And so this guy was head of the Mossad, and he's saying he's part of the problem. This is why they're in the situation that they're in, because everybody thought, well, we can manage this problem. We'll just give them a state and everything will be fine. And they want one state. Israel wants one. Both can't exist in the same place at the same time. This is the problem. So he's, and the title of that article, by the way, is Latest News. So this was written a couple months ago. This was written back in August of 2023. So he's saying, look, we just need to give them a state and everything will be fine. Well, did this age very well? No, it didn't age very well at all. Let's see. This is interesting from a political standpoint. Naftali Bennett's party, the polls are all, by the way, polling is, people like to talk about polling. It's probably not reliable. The most reliable poll, well, we used to think that the most reliable poll was the election. Now we're not so sure about that. But in Israel, so this is in the Jerusalem Post this morning. Naftali Bennett's going to, wipe out Likud. He's going to get like 23 mandates. Likud 19. Gantz would beat Netanyahu head-to-head. But then you go over to Channel 14, which is a right-wing news station in Israel. by the way, that a lot of people want to shut down because they don't like what they say. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? And they say, no, what could we get 30? And the head-to-head Netanyahu would beat Gantz like 47-31. So who knows what the answer will be determined in the next election. So now we have an election. This is a Washington Post article this morning. Trusted aid would play key role in Harris review of U.S.-Israel policy. Listen to this. Even before Israel's ground invasion of Gaza began in late October, Vice President Kamala Harris' National Security Advisor Phil Gordon feared that neither the Israeli military strategy nor key parts of the planned U.S. response would work. Gordon worried that the only way to accomplish Israel's goal of destroying Hamas entirely was to destroy Gaza along with it, with all the humanitarian tragedy that would entail. By the way, do you think this is a friendly article to Kamala Harris? Seems that the press has a soft spot for her. I wonder how that happened. Gordon did not believe that the United States could influence Benjamin Netanyahu, whom he had dealt with during the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks a decade earlier, the person said. It is widely expected that Gordon would be the national security advisor. He's extremely pro-Palestinian, very anti-Israel. This article will not tell you that, but if you unpack what this guy has said and written in the past, you would come to that conclusion. And it says here, if she wins the Oval Office, she could set her own course, and as she formulates her foreign policy, Gordon has become one of her closest and most trusted advisors, helping to guide her through issues from the Middle East to the war in Ukraine. And so when you listen to her and she sort of glosses over what she would really do, make you think like, well, I really support Israel, and I think they have a right to win, but they can't impact other people's rights. Listen, war is war, and there's a way to determine who wins a war, and it's not by the person who's nice. And this is a war. I mean, we don't want to talk about that. And so she gave this interview this week on CNN, and it was just one softball question after another. I watched part of it. By the way, the total interview was over 40 minutes, but CNN has only released about 25 or 27 minutes of it. What happened to the missing 12 minutes? What happened in those? Well, you probably know what happened in those 12 minutes, because the 25 minutes that they released should not give anyone confidence that this person is competent to be the president of the United States, or that the vice president is competent to serve in case something happens to the president. This guy from Minnesota is a lunatic, a leftist lunatic. Okay, so I have some other things, but as usual, I'm bumping up against the time limit that I sort of set for myself. Don't know how that happens. So I mentioned last week that this guy who founded Telegram had been arrested in France. And everybody's, at least on the right, everybody's upset about this because this is viewed as an attempt to cut off people's right to free speech. Telegram is probably the freest channel out there. It's encrypted. It's used by, for example, it's used by both sides of the Ukraine war because of the encryption. So Russian units use it to communicate with other Russian units. Ukraine does the same thing. But it's also attracted a lot of, as you would expect, a free platform like this. It's attracted a lot of pretty seedy people that use it to launder money and that type of thing. So France has charged the founder now with 12 counts, 12 charges of criminal activity. He's a billionaire. He's Russian. Yeah, I think he has Russian and French citizenship. Somebody lured him to France and they arrested him while he was there. And I do view it as an attack on free speech, but I don't know a lot about this guy. There are a lot of allegations of what people on Telegram do and that he knows about it. And I only asked a question this morning to someone, Pam, what if this guy was named Jeffrey Epstein in doing this, had a platform like this? How would we people on the right react to that if he was arrested? Well, we would be doing handsprings, right? Because they got a bad guy. So I don't know whether he's a good guy or bad guy, but I do know that it's an attack on free speech. And this is happening everywhere. Remember, we talked about what's happening in the UK with people being arrested, tried, convicted in very short periods of time and sentenced to years in prison. And this is from a person in the UK today talking about what's happening in the UK. They have so many people that are going to prison, over 1,000 people in a very short period of time. They don't have room in the prisons in the UK to house these people. So what they're going to do is, okay, well, you posted something bad on Facebook or Twitter, you're going to prison, so we're going to let out a rapist, let him go early on his sentence so we can put you in prison. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but this is the same thing that happened in America, right? It's the same thing that happened in Brazil, where they prosecuted people who were concerned about how the procedures employed to elect a new president went. It's happening in Venezuela as we speak. This is a worldwide problem. So in the UK, they're doing this, and look at this. After sending 1,000 plus people to prison following the riots, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has run out of space. Today's papers report new British prisoners could be sent to Estonian jails on the Russian border, obviously ideal for family visits. And then there was this, in fact, this was on an Estonian channel today. Live Now, that's kind of interesting what they call this news program in Estonia. Live Now is Chronicles of Prophecy. Estonia considering renting out their empty prison space. Just happens to be in there. And then in Brazil, they've shut down X. They've shut down Twitter. And Elon Musk is saying, I probably need to restrict my travel. Because look what happened to the guy who founded Telegram. And now I have X, and the prisoner, look at this, this is reported, Brazil's Supreme Court, they're not the legislature. They've put in place a rule that if you use a VPN, virtual private network, to access Twitter, you can be fined up to $8,874 a day, which is more than the average Brazilian makes in a year. This is what the Supreme Court did. By the way, this is the Supreme Court that let Luna, who we refer to as Looney Luna, the leftist, he was in prison and barred from seeking public office, but he got his buddies appointed to the Supreme Court, and they said, hey, it's okay for you to run for president now. And guess what? He won. And now they're going after Bolsonaro, who, by all things I've been told by people who know him, is a good Christian guy. And they're trying to imprison him. They've taken his passport away and that type of thing. The guy who heads up Rumble said this. He says, what you're seeing in Brazil and France is a reaction by the system to do whatever possible to prevent an open internet that allows movements like Brexit and Trump. The number one weapon against tyranny is free speech. So the system wants to take it away, not on my watch. And he's even said, maybe I need, he left Europe, then he started tweeting. Because Europe has these rules in place. Here's a letter from Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, saying, you know, we did submit to the government's request to censor free speech back during the last few years in the last election. He hasn't addressed the issue of the president's son's laptop that 51 security experts came out and said, and by the way, I believe that one of those security experts had said that this Hunter laptop was not an issue. It was fake news. It was a Russian operation. One of those guys, I still have to confirm it, but I read this morning. I think it's probably true. Dana Bash, who interviewed Kamala Harris and Tim Walz on, by the way, can't she do an interview by herself? Does she have to have a handler there to make sure she doesn't make a mistake? Does she have to have a network that will edit out 30% of what she says, Dana Bash's husband is one of the guys who wrote that letter back during the 2020 election. So he goes on and he says this, if Mark Zuckerberg was genuinely apologetic, Facebook page is owned by Ben Shapiro, Dan Bongino, Dinesh D'Souza, Charlie Kirk, and Donald Trump would be cooking with enormous traffic right now. Until then, his censorship continues. And this is the UK London Times thing. For 27 minutes, Kamala said nothing. An odd way to become a leader, but it worked for Keir Starmer, so I guess it's going to work for Kamala Harris. And I don't know whether to believe the polls or not. She's doing pretty well in the polls. So she may win. We need to sort of prepare ourselves for that thing. This is Ann Coulter. I haven't seen much from her for a long time. CNN's Dana Bash interviews herself. Harris aces multiple choice quiz, because when she asked her a question, she was like, well, did you think about doing this? It was like, did you think about doing A or B or C? She gave her like these multiple choice answers, like she couldn't think of what she was really supposed to do. And Foreign Policy had this article recently, Could Civil War Erupt in America? I have been told by friends who have family in the NYPD, New York Police Department, that there's a big plan for a sick out on September 18th when Donald Trump is supposed to be sentenced by Judge Merchan in the New York State cases where Trump was convicted on 34 counts. The belief is that he will be sentenced to prison and ordered to start serving immediately. And that, I don't really want to think about that, but that's my view, is the judge is going to sentence him to prison if the sentencing takes place on September 18th. Because they want that picture to affect the election. That's my opinion. So this is what the Crown Prosecution Service put out this week on Twitter. Be careful what you put. Oh, this was a few weeks ago. Be careful what stuff you put on social media. Think before you post, because you could go to prison for what you post. And their tweet, they have this thing like every day. As of today, our prosecutors have helped secure charges for 522 people, and it's probably over 1,000. So I have some other stuff that will go. So I'll be at the conference this weekend in California, Tip of the Spear. You can find out about that there. And a lot of things going on. Again, as usual, I'm only scratching the surface. And the situation between Russia and the West continues to deteriorate over what's going on in Ukraine. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen there, but Russia's getting increasingly angry. I did have a picture. I don't have it. I'll tell you about it. Putin goes to Chechnya. That's a Muslim area. That's where they had the attack on the school in what was called Beslan. And several hundred were killed, children, teachers. And Russia had a war. I mean, they turned, by the way, did anybody protest when Russia turned Chechnya into something that looks like Gaza does today? By the way, did anybody protest when Yarmouk refugee camp in Damascus was turned into what looks like Gaza today by Syrians and Russians? Did anybody protest that? Nobody cared about that. There is a big double standard. But Putin goes to this mosque. It's the Isa Mosque in Chechnya. He was there with Kadyrov, who is the Chechnyan head. The guy is a terrorist, but Putin works with him. And there was a gold leaf Quran, and Putin kissed it as it was dedicated for use in the mosque. It's on video. Go look it up on the internet. That's part of what we're dealing with. And so like this foreign policy article, Europe alone, and the question is, Trump's return would transform Europe, because everything is his fault, right? Everything's insane. So anyway, let's pray, and I have a bunch of stuff I'll try to follow up if I have time to do. I don't think I'll have time to do a midweek update this week, but anyway, let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thanks for giving us ideas about the things to look for in Bible prophecy about what will be happening, so we can understand what's going on in the Word about us. Lord, I just pray that you'll help us to be, as the Scripture says, wise as serpents and harmless as doves as we deal with the things that are going on around us. Give us wisdom, give us courage, help us to always act in love towards those around us, but also to stand firm in the faith. I pray that you'll bless us this week, give us opportunities to share the gospel. In Jesus' name, amen.